Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Germino. I'm a lifelong Glen Cove resident and a product of the Glen Cove School District, and graduated Glen Cove High School in 1998. Went on to get my degree in philosophy from Hofstra University. And after September 11th, I wanted to answer the call to service, so I enlisted in the Marine Corps after graduating college. Enlisted in 2003. Then went to Paris Island, if we have any fellow Marines in the room. Thank you. And went on to Officer Candidate School in 2005, got my commission as second lieutenant. Then I deployed to Iraq in 2007. And after a year-long tour, I decided to get out and look for a job. I was very fortunate at the time that the former county executive, Tom Swazi, hired me through an innovative program called Warriors to Work. And what that does is it took returning Iraq and Afghanistan veterans and helped them find a job. Why am I running? Because I think our state is taxed enough already, as some of the fellow candidates up here said tonight. I want to repeal the MTA tax. I think it's a job-killing tax. I want to cap property taxes and cap Albany's runaway spending. And I want to repeal a lot of these unnecessary mandates that keep coming down from Albany. And if you elect me on November 2nd, I will fight for you and not someone else. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Commission has suggested that the New York State Legislature is probably the most dysfunctional legislature in the entire country. And I address this to incumbents as well as those who wish to become part of that legislature. If it is so dysfunctional, what would you do to make it more functional, to function better, if you will?
Mr. Germino?
Good. Okay. I've signed on to the New York Uprising Pledge, Ed Koch's initiative. I think we need ethics reform with real teeth. We also need a balanced budget. And speaking of budgets, this is one of the things I've been telling the people I've been walking door to door. You know, the Albany budget was 125 days late. I don't know if that sets the record, but I have a solution for that. If the legislators, controlled by the Democrat majority right now, cannot pass a budget on time, instead, in the Assembly, they want to ban salt, and they want to ban the commercial fishing of seahorses. If they cannot pass a budget on time, they shouldn't get paid. And I would support legislation that withholds payment to legislators to not do the people's job. Thank you.
Please hold your applause until the end so we can get more questions in.
I know that Mr. Levine was the only New York City representative to vote for the MTA tax. And I wanted to know what was the stance on the tax by the other candidates, and of course, Mr. Levine, I'd like to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Mr. Germino?
Yes, I would not have supported this tax. Unfortunately, my opponent was the only non-New York City representative who sponsored and voted for this payroll tax. And you're also paying more at DMV, and you're also paying more when you rent a vehicle, thanks to my opponent. I think instead of taxing you more, we should have mandated that the MTA accept pension reform. This has been a perennial problem with the Transit Workers Union Local 100, the same union that endorsed my opponent. We also need to should have mandated a wage freeze. In December of last year, during the time when the MTA went to Albany and screamed, "We need money, we need money." Instead, it took an 11.5% pay increase and decreased contributions to its health care plan. Do any of you have that privilege that the MTA has? I'm sure not. But unfortunately, like I said earlier, my opponent doesn't mind if you pay more and you get less service. Thank you.
Thank you.
The information that I have is correct. I understand that now public sector employees typically make 2 to 3 times what private sector workers make in this state. I want to know who is committed to standing up for that problem and reducing the growth of these public sector unions, the MTA, and municipal employees.
Mr. Germino?
Yes, I mean, one of the things I've been talking about is the MTA. I mean, since 2005, their labor expense, which is one of the top expenses on their budget, grew roughly around 30%. However, operating revenue is around 27%. Now, why is management not chomping down on them? Because we have restrictive rules in place that don't allow them to hold the line on expenses. So one of the things that I said earlier is I would force the Transit Workers Union to accept mandatory pension reform, like some of you may have 401ks. Well, why is it good for the private sector that's able to control the expense with the 401k and not for the public sector? And the other thing I've said is that we should also hold the line on their increase, their year-to-year increase on wages. This is not the first time that the MTA asked for a pay increase while everyone else saw a pay decrease. It happened also in 2005. Thank you.
Thank you.
In a Newsday article, November 18, 2009, Assemblyman Levine indicated that he would like to bring terror trials to Manhattan. I would like to know, starting with Germino, Mr. Germino, what your position is on this.
No, absolutely not. I do not support civilian terror trials. I don't believe we should try our common enemy as common criminals. Thank you. Many years ago,
Please.
thank you. I think instead, at a time when New York City had a budget problem, or the whole state has budget problems, it was going to cost approximately over $200 million a year. So no, this is not something that we should bear financially and emotionally.
Hello, my name is Hannah Martin from Glen Cove. This question is for all the candidates, but specifically for Mr. Germino and Mr. Levine. Can you please name one or two specific ways that you would grow jobs in Glen Cove and Nassau County that would hire young job seekers such as myself? Thank you.
And we are starting with Mr. Germino.
Well, I think we've beaten this to death, but I'll say it one last time. I mean, I wouldn't do it by having the MTA payroll tax. I've signed on to a pledge put out by the Business Council of New York State called 5 to Survive. Some of the major things that they're talking about and they're asking Albany for is to cap property taxes and cap the runaway spending. I mean, this is not rocket science. I mean, I know politicians, we tend to take a simple problem and we make it complex. So, if you're a business owner, you know how to hold your expenses, but when it comes to government, they just keep growing their budgets. So we want to attract jobs to Long Island. We want to hold the line on taxes. And that's what I would do. I would also support, I know we used to have an Empire Zone plan. I think instead of looking at zones, we should just have across the board tax cut, maybe 10%. Encourage jobs to stay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ed Wolf. Before I ask the question, I just want you to visualize something. Everyone here has seen a rainbow. At one end we have government, and at the other end we have the pot of gold. Okay, that's called the taxpayers. I want to know how you tax somebody into prosperity. How do you do that? Explain that to me, because I don't get it. Thank you.
No, we can't tax us into prosperity. I think one of the things we can do is attack waste head on. And my opponent mentioned health care. Medicaid in New York State we pay about 25% more than California. And California covers twice as many people. I think we need to look for solutions as opposed to just looking for you as another revenue source. I'll give you another example. One of the things I've been talking about is repealing the Wicks law. The Wicks law adds up to 30% more cost in public construction projects. And what do we get for that? We can't afford this mandate anymore that's been placed on us by Albany that you pay for when you pay your property tax bill. So these are some ways that instead of just raising different sources of revenue, we can eliminate waste and look how we can run our government more efficiently.
I'm Minnie Hirsch, and this is a question very different from what you've been getting. I want to know if you would back legislation to appoint an independent commission to set up new districts to be in place for the next election, for the 2012 elections.
Yes, I too signed on to Mayor Koch's New York Uprising pledge. I support nonpartisan redistricting. And if anyone wants an example of a highly gerrymandered district, I ask you to go home tonight, look up the 13th Assembly District. That's a horseshoe And I mean, we don't want to deny anyone the opportunity to vote. We want a fair government, and that's really what we're asking here. So as I said, I support this measure, and I'm happy to be a hero of reform.
Thank you. I hear from the panel that so-and-so from the city's been here, and he controls and controls, has been here a long time, and he controls. Do you support term limits?
I do not support term limits for this reason. I think the people are the greatest check on government, and we're going to see it like we saw last year. If we get the electorate out to vote, if you do not want the incumbent, vote him out. Vote for the other guy or girl. We do not need to keep voting for the same people. The electorate needs to educate themselves. I think a better reform would be, as we discussed earlier, redistricting, nonpartisan districts. That's all I have to say.
Tea Party movement's been in the news a lot. There's candidates all across the country that are besmirching their opponents, saying that they're right-wing Tea Party radical ideologues. And I would just like to know from all of you, which are the core Tea Party principles of the fact that taxes are too high and destroying jobs and businesses in this country? The government is stealing from our children and our grandchildren by spending money that we don't have. Why they think it's so radical that people want their government to be
Okay,
accountable?
I think we got it.
I'd just like to say there's nothing wrong with principles that gentleman brought up. I mean, I think people are angry right now. They're angry at career politicians who promise them one thing and they do another. We want smaller government, we want less taxes, we want to cut spending, and we want to grow jobs. I mean, I know, like the young lady said earlier, a lot of people in my age group can't afford to live on Long Island. What are we doing about it? Are we going to keep introducing new taxes like the NTA payroll tax? Are we going to keep forcing people to leave Long Island and head to North Carolina? Are we going to actually hold our government accountable for wasting money and vote them out in November? Vote them out. If you are tired of the bureaucracy, vote for change in November. Thank you. Yes, and I'd also like to ask that my opponent apologize for sponsoring and voting for the NTA payroll tax tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a clear choice on November. We could either, follow the same song and dance to it, or we can actually vote for new individuals who are promising to hold the line on tax increases and spending, or we're going to continue to drive jobs away. I mean, I could speak only to my race, and I would encourage everyone to go home tonight, if you have cable vision, and look up the debate that I had with my opponent. He was rated by the Business Council in New York State 0% for job growth, and he stated that he wears it as a badge of honor. So this is what we have, this is what we're dealing with. It's either we're going to continue to grow jobs or we're going to continue to drive them away. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and have a good evening.